Hello folks, this is Jamie at the More Gaming Lounge, and I have another build video I'd like to do for you today. I picked up some more terrain from the Iliada Game Studio, and this time one of the sets I've got was this Mediterranean set. I've got a little thing pulled up on the camera. It comes with quite a few buildings, 12 for $15, pretty good deal, 6mm scale. And so this is what I'm going to work on today. So I have this little sprue here, and that's how all his buildings come typically. They're all nice, self-contained piece. You know what pieces go with which building. I really appreciate the design thought in that. There's a couple differences with this particular set of buildings compared to some of the others, and I'll point those out here in a little bit. But first, let's go ahead and start cutting it out. It does pay to have a pretty sharp X-Acto knife. If your blade's dull, like mine sometimes gets, it's definitely worth changing out your blade before starting, and I'll show you why here in just a little bit, other than the obvious. I also don't recommend trying to cut it all in one go. Take your time, do some slight cuts, because even though you got these little scrap pieces, I would say save them, and I'll show that as well here in shortly. But we'll go ahead and finish cutting these out. And there's really nothing to it. A couple, maybe 3 little strokes, and they come off really easy. Obviously, it makes sense to cut straight down as you can because it makes cleaning up the pieces a little bit easier. This one right here is probably the hardest of the bunch to cut out, just because it's inside the piece. And definitely save this one. I'll show you why. This is really a cool little piece when you start playing with it. But right now it's scrap. So the next thing I will do is you'll have where you've cut them off. And the nice thing about this is there's very few connection points, so you have very little cleanup on these buildings. I definitely appreciate that as well. But it is important because unless you're perfect at cutting, which I am not, you're going to have a little bit of a bump there. And so to smooth it out, definitely is going to help the look of your model. I don't think there's any issues in these particular ones, but some of the, well, actually there would. These pieces right here, if they weren't really smooth, would affect how the model goes together. Some of them don't matter, some of them do, as far as assembling. But I always clean first and then assemble, just in case I come across some of those that would interfere with the assembly. Besides, I just want to get it out of the way. It's not exactly the most exciting thing to do. So we'll finish cleaning those up. And again, this one is probably the hardest. I usually find after cutting with my knife that the tip is the dullest part and this is the sharpest. And the problem with this piece is I can't get the sharpest part in there. So you just got to be, oops, I'll probably cut that off camera. Anyway, as I was saying, this is the hardest one to do, so just be extra careful when cutting that. Okay, so now all the pieces are cut out. Oops, sorry. And then one thing I want to point out is before I assemble, it's always good to dry fit, especially if you haven't built one of these before, so you know exactly how they're going together. So this is a pretty simple design. It's got the notches in the roof and then notches in the top of all the walls, and that's where they're going to go. But one thing that's a little bit different with this model compared to some of the others is these little notches on the side. A lot of them are flat, but these don't. These actually will overlap and lock your piece in. Like so. And so it's kind of good to know that, partially because it's going to tell you how you need to glue it. What I found in all of these models in this set is the part that's recessed inside is the part that you're going to want to put the glue on, not this one here. So on this one, it's going to be over here, not up on top. And if you keep that in mind, it makes gluing really, really fast. Once you feel comfortable about how it needs to go together, then you can go ahead and start the assembly. Now I just use Elmer's glue. You could use probably anything you wanted, but with this material, which is more like mat board than MDF, handles this very, very well, and I don't have any problems with warpage or anything like that. If anything, it works too good. You don't have to work super fast, but you do need to work a little quickly because it can dry on you. So I've done a few of these, so I kind of have a design worked out on how I glue. So the first thing I do is I will glue these, put a little glue in these recessed areas. And on the smaller models, you can definitely do what I'm doing, where you glue up everything ahead of time and then put it together. But some of the bigger models, I would actually suggest kind of doing it a little bit piecemeal. Just because by the time you get to some of those final pieces, your glue may very well have dried. And this material will absorb the glue pretty quickly, which is part of what makes the bond pretty strong. I've been pretty happy with how durable they are once they're dried, but it can happen pretty fast. So if you're not careful, you could find your piece not quite where it needs to be. And then, then you're in kind of trouble, because it is brittle when you apply a lot of force to it. Not to say there's anything wrong with the models; they definitely aren't. They will hold up for most purposes, as long as you're not stepping on them. But just keep in mind of the material, and it will tear if you apply too much force. So again, glue what you can comfortably do, and then make sure your pieces are good and fit before you apply a lot of pressure, just because once it's there, it's probably there. I thought about putting a little bit of water in the glue to slow down the process, but I've decided I work quick enough. I don't need to do that. Now this piece I'm going to save till last, because I need to get these done before they dry. I don't think there's a right or wrong way. I prefer to do the long side first. That's how I start. And then I just kind of get it fitting in there. And then I'm going to go to a short side. And then I will do the other long side. And I will save the final short side for last. Now I just put them in there. I don't apply a lot of pressure right in the beginning when I'm doing this, just because I want it not to stick right away. I want it to have a little flexibility until I'm done. So once I'm done, I'm making sure that all my seams at the bottom are lining up, and I'll put the pressure. I also learned press down on the top. In fact, maybe do that first and then start applying pressure on the sides, just to make sure it lays flat and doesn't do this little wobble thing on your table. So as can be expected when working with glue, sometimes you get a little glue that kind of spills over. And if it's underneath, it doesn't matter, but I kind of like to clean up first, do it while it's still wet. And just something flat and straight usually does a good job, just so I have less of that when I'm painting. And I think that's that. And you saw how quick that was. So while that's going to finish drying, let's do this piece. This is the other thing that's a little bit unusual. This kind of is a unique architectural feature on this particular set of models. And this is just really the doorway to the building. But it has a kind of a neat effect. I think it definitely makes this unique, and wouldn't mind seeing some more, I'm not sure, facade pieces maybe for some of the buildings. It'd be kind of neat to have a little kit that you could, design a special architectural style if you applied the pieces from that kit. Hint, hint, Ollie, just letting you know. And so this one is going to fit over the doorway. One thing I've noticed, if you're not quick, it can cause a problem, is if you got too much glue, it'll slide back and forth on you, and it will dry fast, so you really want to get it into place quick. So I found out that I have more control if I hold it from the sides and then squeeze the ends. Yeah, see, you can see how it slid like that? So let me try this again. There we go. And then once I'm comfortable where it's at, then I start pressing. And then once I got it held good on one end, then I'll do the other, and that keeps it from sliding. And that's really all there is to it. So let's put the door on. Now you can do however you want to do it. You can put it in the center. You can put it off to one side. These are meant to cover up a window though. So if you try to do it in the center here, it just doesn't quite do it. So just keep that in mind. But I think that's also the unique appeal of the architecture. I definitely think it's just cool. So just keep that in mind before you start gluing. Kind of figure out where you want to place it. And then when you're ready, this door is a little bit shorter. Is taller, this doorway piece, pardon me, is taller than the whole wall, so you don't need to glue the whole thing, but probably about this much and down. And then you're going to spread it out. You know, again, if you get it too thick, you're going to have to do some cleanup. But you don't want it too thin. You definitely want it sticking. And you do a few, you figure that out pretty quick. So I'm going to offset this one. Actually, I'm going to lie. I'm going to put it on this side. Let's do something different. So the big thing is make sure it's placed evenly, spaced evenly like you want it. And then I find before I actually press real hard, I will push down, and then I will push down on this just to make sure it is even with the bottle, not too high or too low, so that it looks right. And then once it's there, I double check myself, and then when I'm ready, I press. And a lot of times I hold it here and I actually press from the back. I found out earlier when I was holding the bottom and pressing from the top, I would sometimes slide. So just a little tidbit tip there. And then again, I just take a little flat side there and gently wipe off the excess pardon me, glue. And that's all there is to it. But I do want to show you a couple things. So when I talked about save these little pieces that you cut off, these can add designs to the rooftop that keeps it from being quite so plain. Now, there's nothing wrong with a plain rooftop. I mean, you could texture it if you wanted, paint it however you want, make it easier to put troop models if you have infantry that get up on the roofs. But playing with these little pieces can add some really interesting aspects. And I'm not going to actually apply it here, but I am going to show you one that I did, actually did it last night. And so as you can see, I've just taken these little cutoffs and applied them on there. So this one is obviously this, and then I've taken some of these little pieces that you cut off from the spruce and added them on there. The only thing I would caution is these little pieces here. Be careful when you cut them off if you plan on reusing them, because sometimes they will split in half this way. But a little bit of Elmer's glue will fix that, and you can attach them together. And there's, again, no right or wrong. I was pretending that this is an air duct system. Use your imagination. But so I do, like I said, recommend save your little pieces. You just never know where you can apply them. Another thing that I thought was kind of cool with this design is, and there's nothing wrong with the way it is, but if you wanted to add even a little bit more, I found that if you get a little BB, these are actually the perfect size to super glue one of those dudes in there and just add another element to the architecture of the building. But there's so many things that you can do with these, and that's why I like their very simple design. There's nothing wrong with them the way they are, but if you want to add to them, it's very, very simple. And that really is all there is to building these pieces. So what I think we should do is we should finish building my setup here, which I am almost done. These two pieces were the last that I needed. And, oops, sorry guys. And now that it is complete, you can kind of see what I've done here. Neat little setup. Got maybe a little battle going on. These are, of course, the rest of the buildings for the set. This is what you get. I believe it was $15, American dollars. Anyway, neat little models. I built all these this morning, except for the one that I built last night. Definitely a neat little addition to your setup. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys. Have a good day.